Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir, I mean. Dr. Rosser, you are recognized. No more questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman Huffman, Vice Chair Hinojosa, and members of the committee. My name is Wynn Rosser, and I'm honored to serve as the Commissioner of Higher Education. I'm joined today by Deputy Commissioner Sarah Keaton. This morning, we want to share the work we're doing, the advancements we've made, and the path forward, helping students across Texas achieve their dreams and continue to enhance our
Could you
economy.
speak a little louder, sir, right into the microphone? The acoustics aren't great
Yes, ma'am.
this year.
So if you'll turn to the next slide. The state's strategic plan for higher education, building a talent-strong Texas, is centered on enhancing value for Texas students and employers with three strategic goals. First, to increase educational attainment to 60% for Texans aged 25 to 64. Today, only about 48% of working-age Texans have certificates or degrees beyond high school diplomas. This gap is why, even as Texas continues to set records for job creation, many employers struggle to find Texas workers with the credentials they need. But we don't just need more credentials, we need to make sure students are earning credentials of value. We also need to make sure the cost of acquiring those credentials is within reach and doesn't require students to take on unmanageable debt. Finally, the state's future competitiveness requires a stronger research and development infrastructure to help us compete at the frontiers of knowledge, technology, and discovery. The next slide, please. To support meeting these goals, the Coordinating Board serves as a partner, resource, and advocate for the legislature, leadership, and institutions across Texas. We're committed to continue serving in this capacity, ensuring we're supporting students, connecting them with opportunities, and growing the Texas economy. With this in mind, I want to thank you for your investment in higher education last session. Next slide. The 88th Texas Legislature delivered transformative investments, which translate to more resources and meaningful opportunities for Texans. Community college funding was transformed by House Bill 8 from a static allocation model to a dynamic outcomes-based formula which rewards institutions for producing graduates with valuable, in-demand skills. The legislature also committed more resources for financial aid, both in longstanding programs like the Texas Grant and the Texas Educational Opportunity Grants, and also by creating the Texas Leadership Scholars Program. You also invested in advising tools like My Texas Future to support students throughout their educational journey. Finally, the establishment of the Texas University Fund, with its nearly $4 billion endowment, provides resources to bolster federal and private investment in Texas and to increase our research doctorates. As we look ahead, our focus at the Coordinating Board is to build on the momentum of these initiatives to create impact at scale for Texas. We want to thank you for your support as indicated in the filed budget. Your forward-thinking investments will change the lives of students across our state. Next slide, please. Our vision for student financial aid is to enhance portability and predictability while expanding opportunities for students. To achieve portability, we must acknowledge the evolving ways that students navigate our higher education ecosystem by ensuring financial aid programs support rather than hinder transitions from community colleges to universities and enhancing need-based programs. To increase predictability, we must provide students with greater clarity about their financial aid options and do so as early as possible. To serve these aims, we're asking for consideration of $364.3 million to serve 70% of eligible students across our largest financial aid programs, to guarantee need-based financial aid for the top 25% of eligible high school students and eligible community college students when they transfer, which will increase clarity and predictability for students and families. Additionally, we request to maintain the current Texas Leadership Scholars Program cohort size at 300. To expand the Texas Leadership Research Scholars to recruit more high-achieving doctoral students into Texas public universities, to increase the maximum award for the Texas Armed Services Scholarship Program, and provide access to financial aid for students seeking to complete bachelor's degrees at community colleges. These investments will dramatically advance affordability of higher education to meet our state's workforce needs. On the next slide, please. Thanks to House Bill 8, Texas is leading the nation with our dynamic outcomes-based funding formula. We've moved from a system that asked how many students are enrolled to one that instead asked how well are we serving our students and preparing them for success. For example, Grayson College has leveraged additional funding from House Bill 8 to invest in equipment to train semiconductor technicians for local employers. Panola College expanded from just one occupational skills award program with 7 students completing in 2022 to offering 16 OSAs with 149 students completing in 2023-24. These OSAs cover high-demand fields such as business, cybersecurity, welding, and healthcare. Through changes like these, community colleges are finding innovative ways to meet the needs of our economy. We remain committed to supporting them and providing opportunities for students to earn credentials of value. That completes our slides. I want to thank you for your leadership and commitment to building a talent-strong Texas. We look forward to working with you this legislative session, and I'm prepared to answer questions.
Thank you. Senator Zaffarini?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, on page 2 of your slide, you talk about your goals toward 2030. What progress have you made toward those goals, and how likely are you to achieve them, given the level of funding that you are requesting?
We're making progress on all 3 goals, Senator. I think the attainment goals, we are, that'll be the hardest reach. On our manageable debt goal, we've already exceeded our 2030 goal with manageable debt. So we continue to pursue and prioritize programs and strategies that will lead to more students completing credentials. House Bill 8 is an excellent example of public policy that incentivizes institutions and students to complete credentials of value.
Thank you. On page 4 of your handout, you talk about our investment in higher education in terms of affordability, college finance, and research and innovation, specifically focusing on research. How do you differentiate your expectations for research in the different categories of higher education institutions?
I think that Sarah Keaton, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, I think it will take enhanced research activity across all parts of higher education to meet that statewide goal that we have. And I think the legislature has chosen to invest in many different strategies across the different types of institutions to try to bring research and development expenditures as a whole across the state up across the board.
Thank you. In the past, we've heard figures such as for every dollar that we invest in higher education research, we get a return of $18, and specifically for UT Austin, it was $25. Do you have those current figures available for us at this time?
I don't, Senator, but happy to follow up with that information.
All right, thank you. On page 5 of your handout, you focus on need-based programs and financial aid, but I don't see a focus on work study. And the coordinating board has informed us before that students who work do better academically than students who don't. Why isn't there a focus on work study programs instead of all the free money scholarships?
Sure. I think that we remain committed to the college work study strategy and funding that we have. That relationship between federal work study, state work study, and other financial aid programs can be complex. We're certainly very supportive of that program. I think for many of these programs where students are receiving financial aid, they are also working, whether that be a college work study job or a part-time job that's not on campus. So for many of these programs, students are not relying entirely on grant aid, but also continuing to work, whether they're formally in work study or not.
Thank you so much. On page 6 of your document, you talk about transformational investment. How are we ensuring that the projected increase in post-secondary credentials include credentials of value that align with employer needs?
Senator, we focus on high demand fields and high demand occupations. And so we're about to publish the revised list of those occupations based on labor market data that we look at annually. So I think the key there is to provide information to students and families early. And so much like we're saying with financial aid, we'd like for the students to know what those financial aid awards might be early so they can predict what they can afford. Likewise, we need to be able to provide more information early about careers and labor market outcomes and likely wages. And we're able to do that through the tool you invested in last session called My Texas Future, where a student can go on, answer a set of questions, get insight into careers that might interest them and the credentials aligned to those careers. And again, the tool provides average wages for that field and demand for that field. So can we provide information early to those students and the families to help them make a choice that's best for them in terms of the time they would like to invest in higher education and also the cost of higher education. So we're focused on delivering information to students and their families so they can make a choice that's best for them, while at the same time highlighting the fields in our state that we know are high demand and that pay good wages.
Thank you. We hear a lot of talk about Tier 1 universities, national research universities, use whatever terminology you want. But there's some talk about Texas having the most national research universities in the nation. What is your position regarding statements like that? Is it your position that Texas has the most national research universities or Tier 1 universities in the nation, or do we need to do better?
I think we can always do better, Senator. But I'm not familiar with I don't have that information in front of me. I'm happy to look at it and get back with you. But in general, we need to continue supporting the research function. The legislature is invested in research. We know research is important. It figures into all the national rankings of universities. But we also need to continue focusing on all levels of education. So from the community and technical colleges to the general academic institutions to the research universities. And so my position would be we need to be doing better on all fronts. But I'm happy to look more at the specifics of the question you're asking and come back to you with an informed opinion.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner Rosser.
Good morning, Senator.
You heard the questions I asked from the LBB. As you know, we have a trend right now that's happening statewide as it relates to GME funding, where we now have in for-profit hospitals receiving grants from the board in the millions. And I just mentioned South Texas Health Systems receiving $24 million in grant money, yet they're ending their affiliation with the medical schools. And the medical schools are the ones that graduate the students, but the residency slots are now being depleted by the schools, by the hospitals, the for-profit hospitals. Sometimes they create a nonprofit hospital or entity to be able to draw the funds and the grants. Yet some of these hospitals are bringing in many foreign students to fill in their slots, the residency slots. And it would probably be okay to bring resident foreign students, but they don't stay here. We have a limit on the number of foreign students that can stay here and be licensed in the state of Texas. They go back to their countries. Do you have that type of information or data within your agency?
You raise an important question, Senator, and it is, as you've stated, a state policy priority to train and retain more physicians in the state. We report the information that we have. It may not be complete to include the information that you've asked for today. You know, those grant decisions to support GME programs are made according to current guidelines, but we're happy to go back and look at the data that we have, see what additional questions we would need to ask so that we can come back to you with a complete answer to your question.
I'm going to write out the outline the information that we need to be able to actually have transparency of what's going on with the millions and millions and millions of dollars that we appropriated for GME that are where priority has to be our medical schools. So hospitals are now ending their affiliation with the schools of medicine and leaving them on their own, and yet taking all this GME funding to increase their profits. And I just mentioned UHS, which made $1.24 billion in the last quarter of last year in profit. So the system that we have right now is not doing what it's supposed to do, and that is make our state-supported medical schools a priority to graduate doctors and be able to work with hospitals to train them. And that's not happening right now because we have a huge loophole in the way GME funding is appropriated and funded and grants given to people who request it. So I need that. I think we all need that information to really know what's going on out there and make proper changes in terms of as it relates to public policy and make sure we take care of schools of medicine and not just allow the hospitals to take the best part, a big chunk of that money that really hurts our schools of medicine. So I will write those questions, information, data that I think we need, and hopefully you'll be able to get that to us. And if you don't have it, then you have to ask every recipient that receives a grant from GME for that information.
Thank you, Senator, and we'll follow up with your staff and make sure we have those questions.
I just want to reiterate that we want this done, and so I know he's asking, I'm directing you as the chairman to get it done. We want to work with LBB, and we want some answers as we go through this process so we can make appropriate decisions. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
I'm
Madam
sorry, I
Chair.
didn't mean to interrupt you. Are you done? Okay. Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here this morning. Dr. Rosser, I have a couple of questions for you. Continuing on the theme of meeting workforce needs and affordability for students, which is really important up in my district, but I know across the state, another way that the legislature's invested in higher ed affordability and workforce needs in recent years has been allowing community colleges to offer baccalaureate degrees in fields that meet local workforce needs. I appreciated the opportunity to work with Senator Creighton in the 87th on expanding the number of baccalaureate programs a community college could offer back in the 87th session. But Commissioner, could you please share with us if you have any information on the affordability of these baccalaureate degree programs for students in community colleges versus the cost of doing that, acquiring those degrees, going through a four-year university program?
I don't have that with me, Senator, but we can get it and follow up. I understand the question.
Okay. Do you have a sense of one costs more than the other?
Not right now, but we can get back to you quickly on that number.
Well, my guess is that it is much more affordable for families to go through this at a community college level.
It's probably a good guess.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your affirmation. And a second question, going back to your slide about HB 8 on, I think it was slide 6. Could you elaborate on how the implementation of that legislation is going? And if there's anything that we as a legislature can do to help further achieve the goals of this bill? And this, of course, relates to outcomes funding. Community colleges are supposed to receive outcomes funding for students who transfer to a four-year university. However, due to what some people consider something that was actually not intended, community colleges actually only receive this funding if the students transfer to a public in-state school, which sort of minimizes the real known impact of what they're providing to those students. This is particularly detrimental to schools that are close to, I guess, either private schools or near the border of another state, and all of that applies to my district and the students at Collin College. So do you have any thoughts on what we as a legislature could do to further achieve the goals of that bill?
I think we're preparing the supplemental, and we expect to have more information on that in the next week. So the supplemental necessary to finish out this previous fiscal year. I think in terms of the overall program, this is also the first session where you'll have an opportunity to utilize the House Bill 8 methodology to fund community colleges going forward. So I think that's an important decision. I will say that I am fully supportive of House Bill 8 and the method, the goals. It is, although I'm new in this role, it is completely consistent to my belief about higher education, about the need for high demand fields that pay good wages. So I think directionally it's a really important, and again, we lead the nation in this methodology, allocating 95% of funding to colleges based on outcomes. I think the range of outcomes we have also takes into account the complexity of the educational environment. Regarding transfer specifically, ma'am, transfer is something that we do incentivize with the model. I think the recognizing transfer to in-state private institutions is something that is on a lot of minds right now, and I believe there will be legislation filed that takes that into account. In terms of transferring to an out-of-state institution, I think that's an important policy consideration for you and your colleagues to take up. Again, from the state priority of training talent and deploying talent in Texas and retaining that talent in Texas versus the opportunity for a student to go out of state, and what do we incentivize there? I think we could look at the number of students, and we actually have a partnership with the National Student Clearinghouse that we're developing so that we can actually look at the number of students that go out of state and what they study and where. So we could have an answer about the number of students that impacts hopefully soon, but we don't have that information today. But in general, I think it's a policy. That is a policy question that you and your colleagues need to take up in terms of do we want to incentivize students and institutions to send students out of state?
Well, and I appreciate that, and I think, the first question is, because education is first and foremost about are we helping kids? Are we helping students really accomplish their goals, learn, contribute to society? And so I do think it's an important conversation for us to have, and to look at the job we're asking our community colleges to do is to prepare these students. And it's sort of a family decision where those kids go. But I think the first thing we want to incentivize is a good education for these students, whether it's in our universities or our community colleges. So thank you. A couple of questions for LBB. I appreciate y'all being here this morning, and I wanted to circle back to slide 14, I believe, regarding the Texas Research Incentive Program trip.
Yes, ma'am.
The issue was first brought to my attention back when the University of Texas at Dallas, UTD, was part of my district. And of course, now it's right across the border. It's in Senator Hall's district. But as demonstrated yesterday, a number of my constituents are actually part of the McDermott Scholars Program and attend school there. So UTD still affects my district quite a bit. And as we can see from the table in the slide, the backlog in the TRIP funding is a considerable amount of money, and it's owed to 8 universities across our state. Do you know how old are the longest outstanding TRIP funding matches that are still owed to the universities?
Greg Owens, LBB, they go back to 2017.
Okay.
So they go back quite a ways.
Could you confirm or deny, I guess, whether the recommendation in the budget for approximately $409.7 million under the G11 strategy will fully fund this backlog?
Well, what we've showed here, and I'll just go through the sort of timing. The $409 million was based in November. There was already about $383 million that had already been approved by the board. So that is the 2017 going back, all those donations. So in November, that amount with all the other outstanding donations that were out there, depending on where they were in the process. Some were going to go to the board meeting in January, some are even more recent than that. So that number 409 includes the $383 million and then everything else that was out there, all the other donations that came in. And what we've updated here is, okay, since that board meeting, what has happened? So board approved about 18 million in January. So that's how you get the 400 million, the 382 plus 18, and then 13 million. So other donations, even recent, have come in too. So the 409 covers a lot of it, but again, there are some additional donations come in recently that are not included. It's just a timing issue. But
Senator Paxton, just so you're aware that Dr. Bonnet and I agree that we would pay all of that, put it in the base, contingent upon legislation that he and I are carrying to stop the program. So because it's gotten, it just hasn't been, anyway.
Well,
we don't like the policy.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair, and I think,
But
well,
members want that. I mean, the legislature has to vote for that.
of course. And I think, the decision to continue the program or not makes sense. But I do think, given that we've promised the university, we did set this up. And so I think it's, I'm just supportive of us making that program whole.
Yeah.
And I'm also supportive of.
Yeah, just to clarify, it is contingent.
Yes.
Money's contingent on the program ending. So
Okay,
it's kind
thank
of-
you.
it's
I
tough-
appreciate that.
Kind of some tough love there, but we're to honor our responsibilities.
Yes,
But
yes.
moving forward, of course, the legislature has to want to do this. Which is not-
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay,
And then I have
please
one other
continue.
question
Yes.
for LBB. Okay, I'm going to hold that question for later.
okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Yes.
You're done?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah,
Thank
Senator
you.
Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. Paul, good to see you back. Thank you, Doc. Okay. I wanted to, let's see, who monitors the loss of residency slots? That, what Senator Hinojosa was talking about. Who actually monitors when we lose residency slots that have been provided for at hospitals?
So we monitor everyone who is part of the grant programs that we administer. So we will do kind of following up and data collection and monitoring of grants that we provide and how those grants are administered.
So
and what
I'm
happens at those
specifically
institutions.
referring to, I mean, this is important what Senator Hinojosa said, what our chairwoman backed up. But somebody monitors, otherwise all we know is when someone tells us, wow, the hospital dried up the residency slots that were saved, opened for state-supported medical schools. So who monitors that?
So I think we have authority.
Y'all do that, don't you?
We have authority over monitoring our grant recipients. I think where there might be a gap that might best be addressed in statute is monitoring or reporting as a whole. So sort of giving us authority to make sure we can collect from all the entities.
Well, but before we get into really don't want to chase, I want this focus specifically on this.
Okay.
There are dollars set aside for residency slots at different hospitals. We fund our medical schools. The medical students, now doctors, have to find a residency program within the state. Dollars are given in grants to hospitals to pay for the salaries and the work, everything the now resident needs. You monitor that. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then how come we're not hearing about the loss of residency slots? If you monitor it and you see that we're losing slots, they're closing up, they're drying up, well, you don't have to have something in statute to support that and tell them to open the slots back up, do you?
No, sorry. I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question. Yes, we do monitor that, and we can get information to the committee.
Well, and
on that.
And as she said, and I don't mean to talk over you, but you should not only just get us information on it, you should find out, open those slots back up, and claw back any dollars they got. It is not right if we've provided the dollars, they're making money, drying up slots, and we're coming back giving them more money. There needs to be a consequence, and you guys need to, I would think, unless it falls in the lap of someone else, claw those dollars back.
Is it in the contract?
Yeah, is it in the contract? I don't know. That's up to you guys. But I would expect with what you do, you would make sure those spots are secure. And if not, why would we give you money for that?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. We'll go back and look at the both the
Please.
information that we have and also the contracts and the statutory guidelines for what
Well,
we're allowed.
the chairwoman asked for that specifically, and that's very important. Because for a long time, we've talked about the brain drain, residents having to go somewhere else. They need to be here. Let's see, the other thing I was going to, other question or comment, you talk about, wanting the funding for, as the top 25% of the students leave the 2-year programs going into a 4-year program, right? You talk about the increased funding that you want for the top 25% that go into 4-year programs, right?
Yes, ma'am. The request
like
related to the
40
university,
million or something.
the request would be for the top 25% of high school graduates when they enroll at either a community college or a university, that they be guaranteed need-based financial aid if they qualify.
And my question is, and we talked about this, my question is, instead of the top 25% high school, now that they've gone through 2 years of junior college, why not make it the top 25% of those that matriculated through the 2-year program now going into the 4-year? Because somebody may have had a poor GPA in high school, not been the top 25%. Then when they get through the 2-year program, somebody who wasn't just try to follow it, somebody who's not in the top 25% graduating from high school, but they are in the top 25% of those receiving dollars in the 2-year program wanting to move to a 4-year program. I guess what I'm saying is you're looking at the top 25% of high school without seeing the growth of those that went into the junior college. So why is your ask not for the top 25% of those that have performed in the two-year college rather than in high school? First of all, do you understand what I'm asking?
I do, yeah.
Yes, ma'am, I believe so. So the two different factors, the initial factor guaranteeing financial aid, if eligible, to the top 25% of high school graduates, regardless of the type of institution they enter, is initial eligibility. If a student who's in the 40th percentile enrolls at a community college and they're eligible to receive a TEOG grant, upon transfer, they would then, what we're asking is that they be able to take that financial aid with them and be guaranteed the portability of the aid when they transfer to the university. So one is the initial eligibility. Two is if they're on the financial aid, regardless of where they were in class rank, then when they transfer, they would be, so it'd be the top 70, it would be the 70% that we're asking for funding for that would be able to take that aid with them.
So
to
I
the
guess what I
university.
don't understand is why you're asking for these additional dollars. If funding is going to follow, if you're asking for it for a top 25% of students, I would expect the students to be the top 25% of those going through the two-year program. If you're telling me that they're all going to get funding, then I don't understand why you're asking for an increase or an expansion of the loan.
So so students remain eligible under current policy. Students are eligible when they transfer from a community college to a university to receive the Texas grant. Only 3% of the students that transfer and who are eligible end up receiving that funding. So what we're asking is that when they transfer, they're not at the back of the line when they transfer for the funding that they're eligible for. So
I really don't understand clearly. No, I just don't understand. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very clear.
What Senator Campbell and Senator Hinojosa are talking about is very important, and we also are seeing that in our clinical hours with nurses. Last session, I had Senate Bill 458. I believe it was passed out unanimously in the Senate that would have corrected this problem that Senator Hinojosa is working on now with GME, and that was that we had, a for-profit hospital in Victoria who was bringing in students instead of letting Victoria College students rotate. It's something we need to address, and we need to do it statutorily. Senator Hinojosa, my office will be working with you. Senator Campbell, we're happy to sign on to that bill, make sure that it's not just GME, but also those clinical rotations, because every taxpayer is making an investment in those children. I'm going to skip to House Bill 8. Senator Paxton, thank you so much for your question about a student that transfers from let's take Wharton Junior College to Baylor University. Basically, we don't give them credit in HB8. So Senate Bill 49, I believe, Senator Zaffarini, Dean Zaffarini, is something that you filed to correct that. I would suggest we all sign on to that, because that is a success. If a child decides, or parents decide that they want to go to Baylor University, or you can pick Incarnate Word, you can pick any of those. That's a great thing. Staying on House Bill 8, rather, I have some questions. Let me ask this question. If someone graduates from a Houston high school, goes to Sam Houston State University, is there for a semester, ends up dropping out. They say, wow, this isn't for me. I'm going to go into the workforce. They go into the workforce. They find that the real world maybe isn't so great. And they say, I'm going to go back, but I'm going to go back to a community college because it is less expensive. Senator Paxton, as you were making your point, they successfully complete that transition, and they transfer to Prairie View, or they transfer to name one of our other great universities. Does HB 8 give that community college credit for that transfer?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Assuming that they took 15 hours at that community college, when they transfer, they'll get the transfer fundable outcome. And if they're an adult student, there's an additional weight for adult learners, sort of in recognition that those can be more challenging students to retain.
So if you take 1, 2, 15 hours, whatever it is, at a 4-year institution, what do we call our general academic institution, then go to a community college, complete your degree there, and then transfer back or to a new university, you're giving those universities credit.
Yes,
I mean,
we'll
those
double check
community
that.
colleges.
We'll double check that, but that's my understanding is yes, those students would be counted as a transfer student.
So I think I'm struggling here because I think Blinn College has lost almost $3 million because they think that you're not giving them credit for that. We have pursued the Higher Education Coordinating Board trying to get answers, which, like this question, are y'all still operating under emergency rules in HB 8?
We are not. No, we are not. So we adopted emergency rules for fiscal year 24 to sort of implement the program.
Section 56 of the
know.
bill that allowed that.
Yep, absolutely. And then later in fiscal year 24, we adopted regular rules for 24, and then we adopted regular rules for fiscal year 25, working closely with the Standing Advisory Committee and developing all those rules.
So one of the things that I think we're struggling with is understanding HB 8. Would you say other community colleges are trying to make sure that we're seeking the dollars and meeting those metrics that the commissioner, welcome, says is maybe groundbreaking for the rest of the nation?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, this is a huge sea change for community colleges and an entirely different system. So we are working hard to try to do as much communication as we can with community colleges, working closely with TAC. We just did a round of regional summits where we went out across the state to meet with groups of community colleges. We do webinars and try to push out as much information as we can, but recognizing that communication around everything that's changed with House Bill 8 is a big, important part of this.
So, Madam Chair, when I look at Wharton, you represent Wharton Junior College, and I represent Blinn College. Both of them have struggled in trying to get some information on how the formula acts, and I think both of them, Blinn is a huge transfer college, although they're doing a lot of workforce training, but seemingly some of the early projections, wow, we're going to do really great. Then it seems like it clawed back some of those projections. And we've not been able to drill down and get response, Commissioner, from your agency in really understanding that. So can we work on that?
Yes, ma'am. We will work on that.
Okay, thank you so much. And finally, the supplemental request. It looks like the formula performed so well that y'all are seeking a supplemental request. Is that correct?
Well, I'd say the institutions performed well. And
Correct.
And yes, ma'am, we will be coming forth with a supplemental.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome, Commissioner. This is your first rodeo?
This is my first hearing, yes, sir.
Okay.
We call that a rodeo.
We call that a rodeo.
So I've been to other rodeos. This is my first rodeo with you, yes, sir.
Yeah.
I want to start off with transferability. We instituted Senate Bill 25 a couple of sessions ago. Give us a status on transferability, and in giving the status of it, kind of give us an idea of whether or not we've been able to cut the cost of education as a result of that.
We've implemented Senate Bill 25, and we are getting reporting on the courses that don't transfer. The most often given reason for a course not transferring, well, the top two, and depending on the year, it goes back and forth, is student didn't make the grade that was required for the course to count, or a student took a course not on the degree plan at the receiving institution. So I think we have more information about why classes aren't counting. In terms of affordability, I think transfer is an effective strategy, and I think this is another one of those things where communication comes to play so that students better understand what are the courses that are required, so the recommended course sequencing that is available, and better communicating to the students about the receiving institution and their degree requirements remains important.
Well, let's go back to the top two reasons the student didn't make the grade that was required. Is that from the receiving institution saying that? I assume that's from the receiving institution.
Correct.
But the student made the grade to pass the course in the community college?
So passing at one institution may be less than what the receiving institution requires. So a student may make a D and technically pass a course, but a C might be required at a receiving institution. That's going to vary institution to institution.
So at least a C would be passing, right?
Notionally, as an example.
Okay, but it should be. If I'm getting a C in a course at a community college, it should transfer to a university, a regional university, or university. Would you agree with that?
I would say it depends on the receiving institution, Senator, and the requirements they have for particular classes in their core.
Okay. I'd like for you to dig into that to see what is a passing grade for these universities, because again, we're trying to lower the cost of education in the state of Texas. And let me go back to that. Do you have any type of quantitative analysis as to whether or not the cost to get a degree as a result of us putting in this transferability law has decreased?
I don't have it with me, Senator. I can go back and look to see what we do have and follow up with you.
Okay, I'd like to get that as soon as possible because we have universities coming up, and that's going to be a question that I'm going to be asking them about the implementation of transferability. We have not forgotten that law, okay? So as soon as you can get us that information by university, it's going to be real important.
Thank you. I transferred 2 semesters of coursework in my undergraduate, so I was a transfer student, was a transfer advisor early in my career. Transfer is important to me, so I understand the question, and we'll get back to you.
Okay. Let me ask you a question about DEI. Has your agency been overseeing the implementation of Senate Bill 17?
Well, we've been playing the role that we're directed to in the legislation. We collected the certification information from the university systems. We've completed the required report that was due last year, and we're maintaining a complaint reporting system. So we receive the complaints and then forward those over to the state auditor's office.
Okay, and what has been, if you look at the complaints, and I know you may not know off the top of your head, what's been the most pervasive complaint that you've received?
I don't have details on the types of complaints, Senator. I know we receive 1 or 2 a month, but we can categorize them in some way for you, or the state auditor's office could.
Okay, you don't know of any off the top of your head in terms of the major complaints?
No, sir, I don't yet, but I will.
Okay, I'd like to get that information also.
Yes, sir.
Right. I want to ask you about some specific programs. The Texas Leadership Scholarship Program. How familiar are you with that program?
Familiar, Senator.
It kind of gives us an idea of what the status of that program is.
Yes, sir. I can tell you that the students that have been admitted into that program have retention rates in the last 2 fiscal years that exceed the state average, 92 and 96% retention rates compared to about an 86% retention rate for the state. So it's a need-based program. Students get mentoring, leadership experiences, advising, and the students are excelling.
So that program is working then?
That program is working, Senator.
And we have qualitative and quantitative data to prove that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What about the Joint Medical Admissions Program?
That program continues to work well, too, Senator. This last year, I believe we doubled the number of students that were admitted up to 150 that were admitted into Texas medical schools through JAMP.
Do we know whether or not those students that have gone through the JAMP program and then gone into medical school, whether they're graduating and become and staying here in Texas?
I know we have that information, Senator. I don't have it with me today. See if Deputy Commissioner Keaton has.
There is some.
We do know that I think there's maybe 750 physicians who went through that program, students who are now physicians, since that program has been in place for many years. I don't know if we have data on if they've stayed in Texas, but we can look. But we do know that it's produced, many hundreds of physicians.
And that program is working?
Yes.
Okay, as it relates to give me an update. On the last session, the legislature invested significant additional resources and made improvements to the mental health professional loan repayment program. Can you update us on the implementation of this particular program?
Yes, Senator, and this is another success. When the legislature invested additional dollars and broadened the types of mental health providers that are eligible for the program from fiscal year 23 with 29 participants the program grew in fiscal year 24 to 452 participants, so 29 to 452. We took opportunities to better market the program with professional groups that are affiliated with the provider types. And so with marketing, sharing the information, the number of participants grew. But again, that was based on your policy decision to increase the types of providers that are eligible.
Okay, and from what, 29 to how many?
29 to 452, Senator.
Okay, let's go to financial aid for 1 second. And I don't want to be repetitious about it, but on Senator Creighton's questions also. Now, the goal for 26-27 is 70% of the eligible population, right?
That's our request, Senator.
Okay, that's your request. And does the 70% get 100% of the grant that they qualify for, or some variation thereof?
So the 70% and the dollars associated with it are based on average amounts of aid. So the individual student is, their aid package is based on their individual financial characteristics. So a student cannot receive more than the cost of attendance for that particular institution. So a financial aid package is put together for that student based on what they're eligible for up to a threshold. So a student may receive less than the amount, but it would be based on their individual characteristics.
Okay, and that's, and your goal, if you get the additional exceptional item money, it would be 70% of those that, what happens to the other 30%?
I'm sorry, could you read the last part of that,
The
Senator?
other 30%, you're trying to get to 70% of those that are eligible.
Correct.
So there's 30% that are not being served.
Yes, sir.
What happens to them historically?
I don't have information on that with me today, Senator, and what other financial aid they might receive. But again, we would welcome more aid dollars.
But do we know whether or not they are, that other 30% are actually getting aid? Do you guys know that?
They may, Senator. We'd have to go back and see what information we have. There's federal funding, there's private funding, there's institutional funding. So there are other sources of funding in addition to the state aid, but we can go back and see if we have information on what aid looks like for those students.
I want to go to higher education fund recommendations for deferred maintenance. It appears as though that in higher education costs, that the deferred maintenance costs in higher education institutions decreased from about $107 million in 2021 to $89 million in 2023. What has been causing this decrease in funding? Are institutions making up these funds for deferred maintenance using other funding sources, or what?
They are. So of the fixed allocation that each institution receives for HEAF, our data is showing that the amount of that allocation that they are spending on deferred maintenance is going down. However, their total expenditures on deferred maintenance are going up. So they're using other funds for deferred maintenance and then just choosing to spend more of their HEAF allocation on the other eligible categories that they can spend their HEAF funding on.
So they're using other sources.
Correct.
And I'm going to go to LBB. On page on higher education funds summary, page 2, under tough.
Yes, sir.
Are you there? Okay.
We haven't made that presentation yet.
That's the next presentation.
That is the next. I'll hold on.
What's the next? Yeah, we'll have a separate presentation.
Okay. Let's see. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Perry?
So did you just say, Madam Chair, we're going to have another presentation on tough?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just reserve questions for that at
Okay.
that point.
Okay, Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations on your first rodeo. Okay, and just to add to it, are you familiar with what was the Tri-Agency Workforce Commission bill, House Bill 3767?
Yes, sir, I am familiar.
Okay. I just if you're familiar, this was the bill, so that everyone else knows what we're talking about, that was going to try to look at sustainable wage jobs, reporting of it, between the coordinating board, the Workforce Commission, and Texas Education Agency. I haven't seen a report yet. Do you all have a report on what pathways have you all identified, and what, I think you were supposed to like set some targets for growth or on specific job classifications. So if I could ask.
I'm going to let Deputy Commissioner Keaton address that. I know where we're providing information along those lines, but I don't know if it's in the exact report you're referencing, Senator.
So we've continued to work closely with TEA and Workforce Commission on the tri-agency work. I'll have to get back to you on that specific report and those metrics, but I do know that we do have a common data sharing agreement between the three institutions, so we have better line of sight into the data between all of us than we've ever had before, but I'll have to follow up on that specific report.
Okay, if you could, Deputy, because I'm going to ask, obviously, the Workforce Commission as well as TEA, but I'm glad the data, we have a line of sight on the data. I would like to know now, what does the data say? And because if we know somebody can make $120,000 driving a truck in the Permian Basin if they can pass a drug test, or if they can draw a MIG torch and draw a bead and make 85,000, whatever the answer is, we need to know. Plus, obviously, we're stacking those into not just a trade or effectively a certification, but obviously for the degree programs. Okay, so because that was a bill that we passed that we were really hoping to get some workforce data out of all of this.
Well, and again, as Deputy Commissioner Keaton said, Senator, My Texas Future has wage data on it that we get from the Texas Workforce Commission. We're using wage data to inform our high demand occupation list. So we're using that information. We need to go back and make sure that the report you're referencing is available and that you're aware of it. Wage data is a part of the credential of value formula. So we're using wages, and we want to communicate again to students and families early. What can you expect based on the credential you pursue, so that you're not surprised? And also just opening up that the sub-baccalaureate credentials, even the sub-associate's credentials,
Sure.
Many of them pay well. And so how does a student make an informed choice about that?
Oh, and Madam Chair, this was the alignment, I think Senator Cole, of course, remembers that because we have this data, we have the repositories of it at one point in time in 3 different agencies, but when you combine it, there's actually a lot of useful public policy data, as well as for the families and the students to consider, whether it be, jobs that you mentioned before, 4-time or 4-year, grad jobs. It doesn't make any difference, because eventually a living wage plus, that earning power is important. So I just want to encourage everybody to get these reports out, because we put all this together, I think, with federal COVID money, and should be producing a data that we need to have good results from. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Schwartner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, LBB, and then to the agency. Regarding Texas Grants, which is our largest needs-based grant program for higher education in the state of Texas, what is looking on, I guess, page 10?
Yes, sir.
My understanding for 26-27, there's $1.056 billion potentially funded for Texas Grants endeavor.
Yes, sir. That's
and they
correct.
have an exceptional item for $200 million.
Yes, sir, and that's the bottom table on that page.
Okay, so 1.25 million, somewhere around there.
Yes, sir.
Is what is being asked for by the agency.
Yes, sir.
Regarding Texas Grants, do y'all have a breakdown? I know y'all want to reach an attainment of 70% of eligible individuals. Regarding eligible individuals, Texas Grants are available to illegal, undocumented students. Do y'all have a breakdown of how much money and how many individuals Texas Grants funds when it comes to illegal, not legal residents, but illegal, undocumented Texas higher education students?
We don't collect that type of data, Senator. We collect,
And why not?
Well, we collect data on students that are what we call affidavit students. So based on statutory requirements.
That they're applying within 1 year for citizenship,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
How many affidavit students do we have?
About 19,000.
How many?
About 19,000.
19,000. And the average award is what, 6,000?
So that's 19,000 affidavit students that are enrolled in higher education, public higher education institutions at the state. I think we'll need to go back and see if we can determine how many of those are receiving a Texas grant. And the average award for a Texas grant is right around 5,800.
5,800, yeah, thereabouts. It'd be illustrative to the committee and I mentioned this yesterday regarding healthcare programs, but it's throughout, we have a constitutional duty regarding K through 12, but higher education does not have that duty regarding funding of non-citizens. And from a policy perspective, if we're for big, strong, secure borders and walls, then we should also be looking on the back end of what we're doing to incentivize or not incentivize individuals that are coming across our borders illegally against federal law and state law. So can you get us that information regarding affidavit students,
Yes.
the trend of affidavit students to all members on the committee?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Right. And Senator Hinojosa, you requested to clarify a statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick clarification. A while ago, I used the word UHS, United Health Corporation, South Texas Health Systems, which they do the same thing, but I meant to say was Hospital Corporation of America, who is a for-profit hospital. They received $28 million in GME grants, and they're ending the affiliation with School of Medicine, creating their own program, and who made a $1.27 billion net profit on the third quarter of 2024. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I probably should have mentioned this in the first place, but I kind of waited till the rodeo played on for a little bit. But Dr. Rosser was from my district for a number of years. He ran the Temple Foundation. I had from Lufkin, so he's literally in the heart of the district. And I had an opportunity to work with him on a very positive manner for a number of years. And the work that he did and helped coordinate had a dramatically good positive impact on East Texas. So we kind of hated to lose him in East Texas, but I was real tickled to see that he's with the Higher Ed Coordinating Board, and I know you're going to do a good job. Look forward to working with you. And he's had, I'm not going to make any excuses here, but he's been taking a lot of information in with fire hose here in the last couple of months. But I will say that of all the things I've heard here today, the one that probably disturbs me the most is what Senator Hinojosa was bringing up about using our medical slots for people that are not probably going to reside here. I know I served on Health and Human Services for about 8 years before I ever came over to finance. Do what?
We miss you.
And a good number of years ago, one of our big concerns were our medical residency slots. We were putting money into our medical schools, getting our graduates, but we were underfunding the residency slots, and they were leaving to go to places like California. And everybody knows wherever they do the residency, 80% chance that's where they're going to stay. So California was actually smarter than we were on that issue because they provided more residency slots than medical graduates. So over the years, we finally reversed that trend, and we do the 1.1 ratio, and we're all supportive of that, I'm pretty sure, with the understanding that there probably going to be a preference for people who intend to reside here, not people who came to get the slot with the intention of leaving. Now, if that's not real clear in the program, somehow or another we need to make sure it is very clear. And if we have to put it in statute, if it's not already in statute, it probably ought to be in statute. I think I've heard some voices up here that might be where we're having a head.
Working on it.
So,
My support. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam
And
Chairman.
Senator Kokors, you wanted to ask for some data before we wrap up? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. One is to the coordinating board. Baylor College of Medicine, private medical school, but we've been funding them since the 1960s. Am I right on that? Are there any other private, speaking about producing more doctors and the shortage that we see, are there any other private universities that have med schools that we don't fund at all?
And y'all nodded that answer once you speak it on the record, so it's, I'm sorry, but They were nodding yes, but they didn't say yes. So if that's
Oh,
the
yeah.
case, I want that to be on.
So we've been funding Baylor College of Medicine with some supplemental funding. It's not the same as the formula, but since the 1960s, am I right on that?
Greg owns LBB, that's correct.
And then, are there any other private universities in Texas that have a med school that we're not supplementing anything to produce doctors?
There's not any that I'm aware of except for the Baylor College of Medicine, but we can look into it and let you know.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, it's been brought to my attention that some community colleges believe that y'all are denying a great number of, or a decent number of transfers in the formula and not recognizing that. So I'd like to get that data. And so if y'all don't mind, let's meet before the sun sets on Friday. Sometime in my office, I'll do it at 8 a.m. Or Madam Chair, if it's 8 o'clock at night, on Thursday night, whenever we finish, I'd like to do that this week to make sure that we understand HB 8 and any changes that we need to make to that bill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah Perry.
Real quick,
Yes.
I concur with Vice Chair, but callbacks, is there any callbacks today built into the GME program? There is there not?
I'm not sure on those specifics, so we'll have to follow up.
So callbacks, preferably Texas doctors, definitely U.S. doctors, but not. And then there's no focus on primary care through those GME slots. It's general. Is that correct or not?
There are priority areas that are identified, including primary care, OB.
Do you know off the top of your head where primary care ranks? Is it the top priority?
I don't know where it ranks.
There's nothing against specialists, but if we have to be truthful, we don't have primary care. And that's why we're having scope conversations about folks that can fill that void in rural access care. So I would like to know that, but we have to come up with a clawback to punish it truly if they're not graduating people that need to work here. Really quick, trades is the bulk of the trade conversations that the governor put out, what we as a legislature have said unequivocally since about 2013 when I think it was HB 6 started. Is the bulk of y'all's expectation going to be delivered through community colleges, or is higher ed trying to reach into that space? Because what I said years ago is higher ed thought that was beneath them as a philosophical conversation, especially amongst their faculty. We're not going to teach the welding. But now that there's money in it, the question is, are they beginning to reach into that space? Because as we fund community college initiatives and infrastructure for those, and even high schools, some of the high schools have some first-rate career. The ones that can afford it are doing magnificent stuff. Where's the higher ed community in the actual physical training a welder? Am I being clear? Are they trying to reach into it? Do they want to reach into it? Or is this going to be delivered through our community colleges and our high school programs now?
Well, I think if differentiating universities from community colleges and the state colleges and the technical colleges, I'd say most of that delivery of the trades is going to happen in the technical colleges and the community colleges.
Right.
Universities may offer welding as a part of it.
So you're not seeing the higher ed community running towards this new bucket of money, this new concepts?
Universities?
Yes.
Well, the funding formula right now that incentivizes the high demand fields is for community colleges.
Just strictly community. Okay, I should probably know that, but there's other strategies that I work on too. We'll talk about. Are y'all here for research on the TUF, or is it going to be a different panel for the TUF?
We don't have. We just have LBBs present.
LBB. I'll real quick then while I'm here. Yeah. TUF was put in on page 5. Specifically to that, we built in, and as it said, comptroller has allowed for their expectation, I guess, of a new eligibility university system coming in, but y'all are saying they're not ready this next 2 years. Am I reading that correctly?
So we'll have the updated data available in March for where all the universities are on the metrics that the TUF uses. So there were no additional eligible entities based on the data last March, but then next month we'll have kind of the next year.
You are not asking for new eligible funding, but comptroller, for some reason, I thought I saw a number that he's putting out there saying you need to be ready for it. So we're not in the base budget, but we may need to be in the base budget.
I think there is funding in the base budget.
Okay.
There's
for-
1.3 billion in the
It was
base
1.3.
budget.
Okay,
I'm
I saw-
anticipating that it's there.
Okay.
And I'm committed to funding it if they become eligible as
And
determined.
because we fund it that way, even though the share percentages go down, but the dollars should equalize and stay the same. Is that the
Yes.
correct math? Okay.
That's correct.
And then finally, in that TUF fund, and to my chagrin, not with the PUF fund, we are requiring transparency on expenditures through that in a report.
I believe there is a reporting requirement.
And that report will be due this year, or do you remember when?
I'll have to look back on that. There's
That was a very detailed report in my expectations, that we're going to know where research is being done and where expenditures were made. To date, we don't get that from the other two big universities in the PUF. They give you some general feel-good, very flowery language of where they spent the money. You can get a report of the financial information, but you don't get the detail of what they actually put the money to. It's not necessarily all research. I know that. So I will continue to work on that because I think it's important, even though it's, quote, their money, that it's still taxpayer resource-driven money. And I think that's important, and I think that we should know. And then follow up, research for the sake of research. I keep hearing this metric, and it's not y'all, it's everybody in the education community. Research puts us in the national rankings. Research does this for us. Ask my alma mater, the first question I have for research dollars is when will it be commercially viable? So I would like to make sure, and not all research leads to commercial, but the majority of it should. And that needs to be expressed in clear terms. We're not looking to be an employment agency. We're looking to better people's lives, and research is a first step in that a lot of times. But if they can't answer to you with some certainty in this time frame, we believe we could have products actually going to private sector. It's not a good research idea. So I just say that for the benefit of the higher ed community. Thank you, guys.
All right. That's all the questions for you. Thank you very much for being here at your first rodeo. We appreciate it.
More than an 8-second ride.
All right. Okay, and we'll move on now to our other funds that we're going to explore. Chloe Powers from LBB, you can start with the Available University Fund.